Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole, and this is probably our last congressional chat of this year, but you never know. We could easily get called back. Congress actually had a pretty good week this week, and number one, we passed the National Defense Authorization Act. That's a very important piece of legislation. Obviously, it critical in securing our defense. It's a good bill. It's a bipartisan bill. We also extended what's called FISA until April. We're trying to reform that. FISA is the tool that the FBI uses to track terrorists, and our intelligence people use to track terrorists outside the United States for the most part. But it's a very important tool, but it's been an abused tool by the FBI. They've used it internally when they should not have. And so we're working on some reforms, but we don't want to ever lose the ability to track people that are wish ill and literally are planning attacks on the United States. So I thought that was the appropriate thing to do. Keep what we have in place and keep working on a reform bill, which I expect we'll see early next year. Congress also took a very important step, consequential step, in voting to have an impeachment inquiry where President Biden is concerned. Now, this is about what the process would be if the House chose to go forward, and as it goes forward and looks at work. It's not a predetermined outcome. There's no certainty at all that the president would be impeached, but this is how we proceed, and it enhances our ability to get people to testify, that we want to testify, to serve subpoenas, to gather depositions, just to get to the bottom of all these things we've seen around the president's family and whether or not he participated in any of that. Millions of dollars have flowed into 20 shell companies controlled by the Biden family. Over $24 million that we know of. We think the number's probably a lot higher. There's nothing these companies did. There's no services provided. They produce no products, but massive amounts of money from some pretty serious actors that are known for corruption: Russia, China, Ukraine, Romania. We wonder why all this money has moved into these accounts and whether or not there was some quid pro quo, money in exchange for official actions. There's not been established that that's happened, but we need to get to the bottom of this because it's certainly suspicious and raises questions, and the American people deserve answers. So I think Congress will be much better equipped going forward. We certainly made sure in there that the president has the right of counsel, the right to participate, that the minorities also can do that as well, the minority party. We think this is a pretty balanced approach. It's modeled, honestly, after the impeachment inquiry that the Democrats launched in 2019 against then President Trump. It's pretty much something that's been used. Every single Republican in the chamber voted to give our three committees that are doing the investigation, Ways and Means, Oversight, and the Judiciary, the ability to do that. I actually managed the rule that put the measure in front of the Congress, and we not only did the rule, frankly, actually we did a resolution, which means the Rules Committee has original jurisdiction. That's unusual. We don't normally do that. We're a committee that normally engages in the process of moving other legislation, but in this case, the hearing was in the Rules Committee. The vote was run by the Rules Committee, and again, we were successful in that. So it's an important thing. But again, I caution people, this is about a process. This is not a judgment yet. It's to get the information you need to make a judgment as to whether or not impeachment or some other measure might be appropriate in response. There's also a lot going on in Capitol Hill that did not move across the floor this week, but may soon. There's a very serious negotiation going on in the United States Senate. It involves additional money for Ukraine and their fight against Russia. It involves additional money on our southern border and hopefully some policy changes there. Also additional funds for Israel, which is locked in a life and death struggle with Hamas, and money for Taiwan and to counter the Chinese in the Western Pacific, where they're increasingly aggressive. Again, as I said, important border legislation is being considered as well. That's in the Senate. Whether or not they'll come to a deal is not yet certain, but they seem to have made a lot of progress in the last 48 hours. Frankly, this matter should have been dealt with this year, but the president was very slow to negotiate. For those that wonder why border security is attached to these other foreign initiatives, it's because the president asked for money on the border, and I think Republicans are willing to work with him there. We all know that he's created a disaster on our southern border. Thousands of people pouring across illegally every day. Literally, extraordinary amounts of fentanyl, lots of child trafficking, lots of crime that's coming into the country. So we're willing to do some things, and the president said he's willing to make concessions. So let's see whether or not we can actually arrive at a deal. If we cannot, then those other issues where there is broad bipartisan agreement are very much subject to not being enacted into law. So it's a serious negotiation. And if there's a breakthrough in the Senate, it's possible, although certainly not certain, that the House of Representatives would return to act on that legislation over the holidays. I'm certainly prepared to do that. These are important issues. I'm prepared to vote on them. But again, we've got to have a product. Right now, we don't have a product that could pass the Senate, let alone the House. So I wish the negotiators, one of whom, of course, is our own senior senator, James Lankford, well. The only reason why we have movement on the border front is because the Republicans in the Senate and in the House have said we're not moving unless there's some serious action taken to reduce the inflow of people that are coming into the country illegally, as well as all the harmful drugs and, again, human trafficking and crime associated with that movement of people across our border. It's been one of the biggest failures of the Biden administration. I'm glad they say they want to treat things seriously, but there are many people on the other side of the aisle that actually don't want to, that prefer an open border to something that's more secure. Finally, early next year, we'll have to deal with the appropriations process. There's still a negotiation over what's known as the top line. That is how much will actually be spent. Republicans have worked hard to reduce and hold down that number. Our bills are actually all lower than what was spent last year, with the exception of three critical areas. Defense, where we think increases are warranted. Homeland security, where we know we need more money, but we also need a policy change. And finally, taking care of our veterans, which is a sacred obligation. All those areas have been funded well, but again, they're held up until agreements on the rest of the budget can happen. I do worry that we have deadlines coming up toward the middle of January and early February to try and resolve the differences. Right now, we're a long way away from being where we ought to be. Let me end with this. It's been an extraordinarily tumultuous year, particularly in the House. We began the year with 15 votes for Speaker. That has not happened in 100 years. During the year, of course, we lost our Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. All the Democrats and 8 Republicans cooperated with one another to do what's known as vacate the chair, that is, remove the Speaker. We went 22 days without a Speaker. That's never happened in 234 years of the history of Congress. I regret that loss very much. Kevin McCarthy, I think, was an excellent Speaker. He had extraordinary support inside the Republican conference. 96% of our members voted to retain him as Speaker, but a very small group used the rules, and perversely, in my view, and he's no longer our Speaker. I think that's a great loss if you're a Republican. Kevin McCarthy was without question our best political strategist. He was without question our best candidate recruiter and our best fundraiser. And finally, I think he was a very effective Speaker. He got a lot done in a very brief speakership under very difficult circumstances, always dealing with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic President that frankly are far more radical than any of their predecessors, either as president or in the United States Senate. And the fact that he could bring some concessions out, stop the Democratic overspending, was a tribute to his skill as a legislative leader. He's a personal friend of mine, and I'm going to miss him very, very much. But you know, there's a time to put all of this aside and focus on what really matters, and that's the holiday season. It's not just a holiday, and we all need one, but it's also the time of the birth of our Savior, Jesus Christ. So I wish you and your family safety and security. I hope as you gather together around your family table that you take time and pray for the men and women that protect us, the first responders in our own communities, our police, our fire, our frontline people in the medical community, our doctors, our nurses, and obviously most of all for the men and women that put on the uniform of the United States and stand between us and harm's way in a very dangerous world. Lots of them are going to be far away from their families this Christmas, and many serve in very dangerous frontline situations, particularly in the Middle East, and frankly in an increasingly dangerous world in Europe and in the Western Pacific. So take time and know that the comfort and the security you enjoy is purchased by their sacrifice and their willingness to serve. So God bless you. God bless your families. Please have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas season, and pray for our country. Pray that we have a good new year, that we find common ground as a people, that we stay united against the threats, that we maintain our freedom and our security in a dangerous world. And that's as much in the hands of the Lord as it is in our own. So pray for His mercy, His protection, if you're so inclined, on your family, but certainly on this great country that we're all privileged to share, the United States of America. God bless you.